Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the battle group overview for the Demi-Brigade SAS. Now for those of you unfamiliar with this series, it's a series where I go through all of the different units that I choose for my division and I give my reasons for that. There is a link to the playlist below where you can find battle group overviews, updated battle group overviews for all of the other divisions in the game so far, other than the rest of the DLC divisions that I haven't done yet. And some of them may already be out of date. There's a lot of stuff that I change all the time, but the concept behind like why I bring stuff in is still the same. So the reasoning I give may change because of different balancing, and you know that may change like the specific units, but the reasoning is generally the same. So today, starting with the Demi-Brigade SAS, I'll be moving on to the rest of the DLC divisions from Back to Hell. And let's get started. We'll jump into Recon. So, for my Recon tab with the Demi-Brigade SAS, it's all about La Resistance. We have FFI Saboteurs, both squads of those. These are fantastic at the start of the game because they come in the FFI Traction. And I'm going to mention this vehicle quite a lot because it is the fastest transport in the game. It has 135 km/h speed, and this allows any unit that comes in these early on to get to positions that other troops generally cannot. So you can use these and you can deploy them past the 50-50 and really ambush units coming towards you from the other side. So that's definitely a very strong strength of the FFI Saboteurs coming in the FFI Tractions. The other beauty about the FFI Saboteurs, they will demolish infantry at close range with the HE grenade, but after they've used it, be a little bit careful with what squads you engage them with, because things like Stosstroop can just rip through them if they don't have the HE grenade to fight back. So that is definitely something that will require some micromanagement, but definitely worth having. The fact that they have like 6 men and it's still very good stealth is awesome. But it gets better than that because we have FFI Macassars. These guys are actually one of the best close range infantry squads in the game at the moment. They have 20 HE that they can put on target at that 100 meter range, and it's exceptional. They will rip to shreds enemy squads. You will need to be careful of things like HE grenades that can take these out, but there aren't many other squads that can match the HE just based on their light arms. So these come in at strength of 12. They still have very good stealth, so they're very hard to spot. But they do come in the FFI DMA, which is a lot slower than the Traction. So these will be much more defensive than the FFI Saboteurs. But generally people like to use these as Recon, which can then hold their own if they get found. And that's generally how I'd recommend using them, as if you invest all of your Recon into fighting your frontline battles, you will run out. And that will definitely leave you blind for the rest of the game. Now, one thing I will mention with the Macassars is that they do have this Kar 98. Now, this can fire at 300 meter range, so you really have to make sure that you micromanage these properly. Of course, you want the 20 HE at close range, so you're going to want to have the Kar 98 on, but beyond that, I would recommend turning off the Kar 98 or just quite simply put them on to return fire if they are hidden, in order to not reveal themselves at infantry coming at them from a distance, because if they shoot their 2 HE on the Kar 98, I can guarantee you they'll come under a hell of a lot of fire and they can't really do much about it. Like, they can't fight back effectively. So that's definitely something to think about. Now the rest of the Phase A units are the FFI Panhard, and this thing is a beauty for killing APCs in the early game and mid game. The 5 AP is just enough to get the job done, and the 17 round per minute rate of fire is absolutely spectacular. So that's really what this is great for. Good for just supporting the tanks that you can get early on, or just, you know, assisting an infantry push where you're not up against anything too heavy. It does have an 8 HE machine gun as well, so definitely can help out in that sense. At 600 meter range. Is of course armoured, so won't die to light arms fire as well. Now that's why the FFI sidecar is not really a choice. It doesn't have any armour, machine guns can take it out, it's not very effective. Vehicles like this, I reckon they should really make them have very high optics, just to make up for the fact that they are incredibly weak, and that would definitely make people consider taking them. Whereas at the moment, I wouldn't recommend it at all. Now we go on to Phase B. In Phase B, you have access to the SAS Scouts. These are 4-man squads. They're actually not too bad for recon purposes, in a sense that if they get spotted, they can smoke themselves off and just run away, like defensively. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend getting these guys into like close range combat. It's not really a good idea. They are just a generic recon squad that is used for purely recon and nothing else, unlike the initial units that I've already talked about, which are actually decent at engaging in combat. Then we have the Ses Sniper, I think probably one of the most overpriced units in Steel Division at the moment. 1-man squad, 35 points. Yes, the Sniper is very good and good support for 500 meter range, but this can be taken out by one shot from most things. Like even a tank with 1 HE can kill this dude, and that's not great investment if you don't get much out of it. So you're going to want to make sure that the SAS Sniper's picking off things like, I don't know, IG-18s or like a PaK 38 or something, and then it would be worth it. But otherwise, I'm not too convinced. I have seen them in play, especially competitive play, but yeah, I've never been convinced by them, which is why I don't have them in the division, but I'm sure people will argue otherwise, and that's fair enough. Let me know what you guys think, of course, of my choices in the description, and maybe talk about some of your own. Now in Phase A, or in Phase C, you can bring in the M8 Greyhound. This is a Recon Greyhound, comes in at 1 star. But by Phase C, I kind of feel like this is redundant. It's just more of a thematic thing for the division, since the Demi-Brigade in general is based off the fact that early game it's all resistance, then they get backed up by the elite French SAS, and then later on the Americans come and steal all the glory. So that's basically the Demi-Brigade SAS in a nutshell, and you can already see it here in the Recon tab. So that is Recon. Let's move on to infantry. So the infantry tab for me, I'm pretty happy with how I have it at the moment. Early on, you definitely want these Jedburgh. These guys are 3-man squads. They have quite decent HE for close range. They're very sort of versatile squad. They have AT, they have HE grenade, and they have smoke grenades. They are 2-star, which means their command radius is pretty large, and yeah, they're great for accompanying your troops early on, especially the FFI rallies, making them 2-star instead of just 1-star. You can use them to accompany your recon if you want to get some Makazars in close range combat. Yeah, very versatile squads, can keep themselves safe with those smoke grenades, take on infantry with the HE grenade. Wouldn't recommend keeping them in contact after the HE grenade has been used. But you can also, of course, use them to ambush vehicles with the Gemmen bomb, although it's not very reliable, so I wouldn't necessarily count on that if I were you. But yeah, solid squad there, much better than the FFI CDP that you could otherwise get, which doesn't really have any of the smoke grenades, HE grenades, or AT grenades, just has light weapons and no command stars. So to me, it's a no-brainer to take the Jedburgh. Now moving on, we do have FFI Rallies. These guys are relatively okay. 8-man squads, not the best strength, honestly, but they do have, 6 HE at 300 meter range, and they can pin down squads at longer range with that MG. Of course, they do have a Faustpatron as well, which allows them to take out, of course, vehicles at the 150 meter range. So, it's an okay squad. Will definitely make up the majority of your frontline infantry in Phase A, unless you're planning on using the Recon tab more so, and a lot of people do. Now, to accompany the FFI Rallies, I have the FFI Hotchkiss. I actually really rate this machine gun. It's quite expensive, but and it has the same HE as the MG34. But the beauty of the Hotchkiss is it has 7 accuracy, which makes it actually pretty deadly against a lot of vehicles, even armoured ones. I've seen this thing kill like half-tracks and so on, and if it's placed in a very good position, can continuously do damage throughout the entire game. So definitely would recommend the Hotchkiss over the MG34s, but I'm sure people have their own preferences. Of course, the availability difference there might cause you to favour the MG34s. Now you can get FFI Rallies in the half track, and I would recommend having this card and +1 card in the DMAs. That's just because the half track gives you a little bit more versatility, maybe able to pick up your squads again and move them about the battlefield, but also of course it just provides that fire support that's very useful if you want to make a significant push. Into Phase B, I would recommend taking all of the SAS. The SAS Group FM are okay, they're not fantastic. They have, at 200 meter range they can put down 3 or 5 HE, which isn't too bad. At close range though, they put down 6 HE, and considering they're a 2-star squad, they can actually do a relatively high amount of damage. The beautiful thing about the SAS Group FM is they have those 2 smoke grenades, and that can make them really awkward to deal with. So in Phase B, if you spam these out and put them in a lot of awkward locations, they can definitely hold the front line very well for you and can help you take ground as well under the cover of their own smoke. So that's what I'd recommend to use these guys for. Also, beautiful availability on the card at 8. Can't really go wrong. Then we have the SAS CMDT. These guys are similar to the Jedburgh in their use, just really large, again, command radius because of their 2-star veterancy. They have 12 HE at close range, which is actually pretty significant. They have 2 Sten guns and 2 Thompson machine guns. So yeah, very strong close range squad for 4 men. And they also have a Piat, which is great. Furthermore, they do have the 3 smoke grenades, and that's the beauty of these SAS, is they are very versatile because of this smoke. It just allows them to get to positions that would otherwise be pretty difficult for other squads that don't have smoke grenades. So when you have to cross an open area and it's just that little bit too far where you're going to take machine gun fire, smoke it off, carry on. And that just allows you to take that ground. Things like in forest engagements as well, where there's like a road partitioning the forests, and you're like, if you try and run over that, you're going to just get mowed down when you're out of cover. If you just smoke the road and then just run across it, that's one way to use this smoke grenade very effectively. Then we have the Chasseur Para. These guys are absolutely awesome. At the 100 meter range, you have 17 HE to work with, which is very good indeed. They lack a HE grenade, which is unfortunate, but would probably make them extremely overpowered. So they just have a Gammon Bomb AT grenade and a couple of smokes. And the smokes are, again, enough to get them close enough to do the damage, which is good. And the AT grenade is welcome as well in order to, of course, advance and then maybe catch out some vehicles. So, yeah, brilliant squad. Don't know why you wouldn't have them. Then moving into Phase C, you do get a card of 9 armoured rifles. You can actually get way more than that. You can get... You can get a solid 27 armoured rifles in Phase C if you really wanted to. But the fact is, you're probably not going to be bringing them all in by the end of the game. It's 40 points a pop, and why would you need any more firepower than 9 half-tracks and 9 armoured rifles? You have bazookas, of course, on all those squads. Armoured rifles we've seen plenty of times before, so don't really need to go into too much detail on those. Half-track, of course, just great fire support as usual. And that's your infantry tab. Let's move over to the tank tab. So for the tanks, I'm going for the FFI Panzer 3s. I actually recently changed this from the FFI Hotchkiss 39s. I think the Panzer 3s really sort of help you translate from Phase A to Phase B much better than the Hotchkisses do. So if you can afford yourself these early, they will actually still do well moving into Phase B. And that's why, yeah, they were favoured over the Hotchkiss 39s. I've got the B1 BIS in here. This is just a command tank, but I just love, of course, the B1. It's also the B2 in like the 716th and so on. So yeah, this is just a really nice tank. Comes in with the HE on its main gun, machine gun, and the high explosive round there. So against infantry, this thing is just absolutely massacres them and can also pin down AT guns relatively quickly as well. So that's just something that's really good for, especially like the low AP AT guns on the German side. You can take those out relatively nicely with a B1. Also, you can do the fire position trick with this tank as well, similar to like the M8 Scott. Like if you press T and use the fire position command just short of like a 1,000-meter range AT gun, this can be used for that. So that's another good reason to have it in Phase A. The F5 Panzer IIIs aren't as good for that at all. These will just be for, again, taking out like light armored vehicles early on, like half tracks and so on, and also just like light tanks like Stuarts and stuff. Actually, not Stuarts. I mean, it would be like enemy Panzer IIIs or Hotchkiss 39s and stuff. I always get confused when thinking about this division because it has a lot of German equipment, but it's actually an Allied division. The other final thing that I would definitely recommend in Phase A is the Panzer IV. Like a Panzer IV in Phase A is extremely strong. It can take on a lot of the German armor that they can bring in Phase A. I think the only one that can really match you is like the 2nd Panzer at the moment with its 1-star Panzer IVs. I'm not really sure if there's another division that can bring in a Panzer IV in Phase A, but it's awesome that the Demi-Brigade can. Yeah, you will need to probably have it with some command nearby, since like an unvetted Panzer IV isn't necessarily going to be super accurate, but a 6 accuracy gun is a good start, and with an extra command star will definitely hit its targets. So that's my Phase A. Now you got to realise that there is no Phase B options here, which is why, again, Panzer III over the Hotchkisses, because they translate better into Phase B. Then moving into Phase C, the cavalry arrives. We get the Command M4A1s. I just have these to accompany the M4A376s, which are absolutely gorgeous in this phase. 1-star, you can make them 2-star, and then they are killer at both close range and long range. They're very good at close range versus things like Panthers and Tigers. At longer ranges, they can help you deal with, of course, things like Panzer IVs and so on. So that's generally my recommendation on how to use them. The aim time is really good. So like having them pushing around tree lines onto Panthers and stuff, but works out quite well. And sometimes you'll be able to push around, fire a shot and reverse in time to not let them fire. And that is a pretty big deal. So definitely something you could try and exploit. Doesn't always pay off, so be careful. Yeah, if you're close enough, you might even just score the kill on the first hit anyway. The other options that you have in this phase are the M4A375s, but I think it's worth having all of the armor that I've brought in Phase A, so I don't have any slots left. But it might be worth considering bringing these in since they are a lot cheaper, and you could bring in like 1 a minute very easily. But to me, 76s are much more worth saving for, so it's more of a personal preference. I'm not going to say the M4A375 mils are bad, but yeah, I just prefer the extra AP there. Definitely helps out, and the extra range, of course. So that is my tank tab. Let's move on to support. Now, support's pretty simple. There's not too many units here. In Phase A, you need to have some logistics, of course, just to try and repair vehicles that are important, especially things like the Panzer IV. If it gets like a track wheel destroy, you're going to want to try and save it if you can. If it's, of course, in a pretty dodgy position, then you won't want to bring in the supply to fix it. But it's always worth having it there. Like, supply has definitely become more prevalent now that you can fix up vehicles. So definitely would recommend having at least one card in Phase A. I mean, it's the only card you can get, but worth having nonetheless. And also helps you reload your mortars going from Phase A to Phase B, where you may start to run out of ammunition. The other choice for Phase A is the Kubel MG, but can be killed by light arms fire, so it's pretty useless. There is also the F5 Tractions, but if you use your command infantry effectively alongside your command tanks, you shouldn't really need extra command, so wouldn't really recommend using these. There is in Phase B the card of SAS Jeeps, and honestly I'm not convinced about this unit because it's unarmoured and can again be killed by light arms fire, but I've seen them do pretty well in certain situations. So if you keep them out of the way of 400-meter range Panzergrenade fire, you can definitely melt infantry squads very easily, but as soon as they come under fire from anything, they will likely die very quickly. But that 24 HE when it gets on target, 3-star veterancy, if you have command nearby, you can imagine what sort of damage you're doing. It's pretty incredible. For Phase C, GMC, just a generic supply vehicle. Again, just to help with your late game artillery, which you should have quite a lot of. I think you get M7s late game, so you want to have these accompanying them so you don't run out of ammunition, of course. So that is the support tab. Let's move on to anti-tank. So in the anti-tank, I didn't used to have them, but I've been sort of swayed by watching competitive play to have the F5 Partisans. 10-point squad with a Panzerfaust. They're not really great for close range infantry combat, but they are fantastic for ambushing, of course. So they have the very good stealth, and if you can sort of spread them around into tree lines that sort of nearby roads or just sort of in locations that are likely to have tanks passing nearby, these things can pick up and pay for themselves very quickly on some of those kills. So that's something that you're basically going to be looking for with these kinds of squads. Then moving on, I have the Pak 38s and the Pak 40s. The Pak 38s, of course, being the 1000 meter range 10 AP AT guns, and then the Pak 40, of course, being the 1200 meter range with the 13 AP. I'd probably recommend bringing in the Pak 40s before you bring in the Pak 38s. Although the Pak 38s being a lot cheaper, it really depends on what you need. Pak 40s, though, can definitely cover a very large amount of the map by themselves. Pak 38s are more ambushing AT guns. You don't really want to have them spotted before you have them fire. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. So that's just something to say about that. You know, just keep them behind that tree line, not in the tree line. It's generally a good idea, so that Recon can't see them, because if they're sat in the tree line, they will be able to, but if they're sat behind the tree line, they won't be able to. So you just move it forwards when you need them. Like, yeah, you might miss out if you're not paying attention on a couple kills, but trust me, it's probably worth it. So the other thing in Phase A, and one thing that really makes the Demi-Brigade pretty exciting, especially when it was like first introduced, is the Yak Panzer IV. Having this in Phase A is a very powerful tool. It has both the AP and HE shells. So unlike the Beuter Firefly on the side of the Germans, it has the AP value, but it doesn't have the HE value. So I was kind of expecting that when I saw this Yak Panzer sort of announced, but it's not the case. You still have that HE. So this early on is extremely good for taking on enemy AT guns. You can take out enemy Pak 38s and enemy Pak 40s very easily with a Yak Panzer IV, and that's something it can be directly used for. It is, of course, great at taking out armor at a distance. I wouldn't recommend getting it into close range combat because it is a bit cumbersome, and it can, of course, be side shot quite easily with only 5 armor on the side. So that's all things to consider. It's also very expensive. So for Phase A, this is going to take 3 minutes before you can purchase it if you have like 0 cash. And I mean, that can sting a little. Don't rely on it too much. It's generally something that I tend to see more come in Phase B, because you don't necessarily need it in Phase A, especially if you're using things like a Panzer IV, for example. And that's probably a better way to go. It's a lot more versatile, a Panzer IV, than a Yak Panzer. That's all I have to say about that. Moving into Phase B, you can get these SAS Piats. They are 4-man squads with 8 HE at close range. They do, of course, have that Piat, but Piats, being as they are, not fantastic. I mean, it does have the 8 accuracy now, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not really convinced about Piat squads on their own. Like, fair enough, partisans with the Panzerfaust, but not a 2-star Piat, you know? That's just generally the way I see things. And moving into Phase C, I rely on the M5 guns. Now, the reason I choose M5 guns over all of the rest is M1 guns are kind of outclassed at Phase C. Generally not very useful unless you get them into perfect ambushing positions. M5 guns you'll still need to get into ambushing positions at Phase C, but can kill off a lot of stuff at range. Also challenge Pak 40s quite well. Like, you can put an M5 gun directly up against a Pak 40, and if you get the first shot, you will almost always win that engagement. So that's basically what these are really great for, and of course kill most armor, especially Panzer IVs, very easily at the 1200 meter range. M10s kind of not really useful because you have M4A3 76mm, and I'd much rather rely on those than these. The M10s have really slow aim time, their turrets turn very slowly, and that definitely makes it difficult when engagements get closer. So that's something you just got to look out for with these tanks specifically. So that's my AT, and of course, since your AT is relatively weak in Phase B, you've got to kind of compensate in Phase A, and that's what I'm doing here with picking all of these AT guns and the Yak Panzer. So that is that. Let's move on to anti-air. On the anti-air, there isn't really too much to choose from. In Phase A, you have access to the Citroen Hotchkiss and the Canon CA25mm, but what you have to remember is this has got to span you Phase A and B. So picking up both the Citroen Hotchkisses and the Canon CA25mm is always a great idea. These CA25mm are actually pretty good, so they will help you force back enemy aircraft. They're not necessarily lethal, they won't shoot down any enemy aircraft very easily, but they will definitely help you force them back. The accuracy is what kind of lets them down, but the HE is relatively okay. The Citroen Hotchkisses, these are actually pretty nice. Obviously not extremely powerful, again 4 accuracy, 6 HE. One thing you can do though, similar to like the SAS Jeeps, you can use them direct fire support, and they're also relatively cheap, like 40 points a pop is not too bad. But I would definitely recommend bringing in the CA25mm before you start relying on the Citroen Hotchkisses. Citroen Hotchkisses, you bring those in if you really start seeing like a lot of HS129s or something like that in Phase A from like a 3rd Fallschirmjäger or something. That would be a reason to bring these in early on. But again, remember that it's got to span you over Phase A and Phase B. Then into Phase C, you have both the access to MGMCs with 3 a card at 1-star availability, or you have the CGMCs with 2 a card at 2 availability. And I've always preferred the CGMCs just because they get that little head start at the 1000 meter range with the 10 HE gun before they start engaging with their machine guns at the 800 meter range. Like, yes, the MGMC has more HE overall. Actually, no, it doesn't. But I think generally these guys are more like lethal at close range than the CGMCs, because this 37mm it like just doesn't hit as much. But yeah, the MGMCs can be very, very strong if a aircraft is flying directly overhead. But yeah, I always prefer relying on the CGMCs. And the reason I don't have like any more AA, or I don't fill up all 4 cards, is because I rely on quite a lot of my air tab for anti-air. So moving into artillery, I think it's extremely important to have these 2-inch mortars in Phase A. Having mortars in Phase A is great for a couple of things, of course, pinning down infantry, but also, more importantly than that, smoke. Smoke is just something that I definitely would like to see more people rely on. It's just really, really good for keeping infantry safe, saving different vehicles. Like, say if your tank takes a critical and you have a mortar nearby, just smoke it off and basically let it recover, and then you can obviously use that cover to get it away, repair it or whatever, and then go back into battle. And it can just save you from multiple different sort of things that can happen, like random AT gun comes out of nowhere, smoke it off. A tank's really pressuring you, smoke it off. Smoke can save you from many different things and also help you advance. So 2-inch mortars, incredibly important for that, very, very fast firing. You will want to keep them moving in between volleys because they're only 2 strength and they can be taken out very easily by counter battery due to their low range. So that is just a couple things to consider there. Moving into Phase B, I do currently have the Jeep FAO, which comes in with a 381mm off map. It's a pretty strong off map, but honestly, you could consider bringing in 3-inch mortars for sure. These will definitely help you out moving through Phase B with a little more considerable mortar power for taking out things like AT guns. Like their veterancy is what makes them really appealing, because they'll be relatively accurate and they'll fire very quickly. So they'll be very fast to take care of things like AT guns if you want to advance, maybe things like IG-18s, even just pinning down light arms vehicles, stuff like that. So that's the beauty of the 3-inch mortar. Jeep FAO, much more lethal, can take out a lot of different types of units, just to get those right strikes in there. Just make sure you push onto a strike. Like if you're going to bring an off map like this onto the field, make sure you use it to make ground. Don't just use it to kill units for the sake of killing units. You want to like put it on an area where you want to push, let the artillery hit it very hard, and then push into that area, because that will make you ground and help you win the game rather than just taking the kills and carrying on, right? So again, just keep that in mind. Moving into Phase C, you can get M21 mortar carriers, but they are completely outclassed by the 1-star M7 HMCs because of course, HE value on the mortar compared to like the howitzer, and both can still provide smoke. Yes, the mortar carrier has like the better rate of fire, but that 15 HE is invaluable for just like one-shotting or two-shotting AT guns or counter-battering. That's the other beauty of the howitzer, is it has a 2,400 meter range over the 1,200 meter range. And yes, you're playing 65 points more, but in Phase C you get 150 points per minute, and that is something that you can really use to exploit and get these in, and then work with your American units like the M4A376s and all that other stuff, and really like make some ground. So that is again the beauty of the M7 HMC in Phase C. And those are my choices there. Moving into the air tab, we have the Western Lysander. Now, recon planes have really come into style, I guess, recently, since Gonzo made such great use of them quite a while ago now with the 116th. They've really become like a fashion accessory in people's sort of divisions. In this case, the Western Lysander is a little bit different. It's a recon plane with bombs, and therefore in the early game, if you don't get countered by any fighters, it can really help you pin down things like AT guns and infantry squads early on to give you that little bit of an advantage. However, if you don't necessarily need the recon, then I would recommend that you rely on the Spitfire Mark 9s more so than the Western Lysander, just because it has a 10 HE power bomb that's going to be a lot faster at pinning things down. Also, the Spitfire Mark 9 can kind of look after itself if it gets tackled by an ME-109 G0 or an ME-109 G6R6 or something similar. So that's the beauty of having Spitfire over Western Lysander, but the Western Lysander, of course, will be able to spot those AT guns on its own in the first place, and can be useful in Phase A specifically when divisions you're playing against can't really get rid of it. Then also in Phase A, I do have Tempests. This is more just to counter enemy stuff. Like, I wouldn't buy in the Tempests in Phase A unless I really had to. So say somebody's screwing me over with a HS-129, like a Tempest will be a choice that I make specifically to take out that unit. Otherwise, it's unlikely I'll bring them in. Like if I see an opportunity maybe to shoot down a plane that's chasing my Spitfire Mark 9 or something like that, that's again another reason I might bring it in. But it's all very situational with these Tempests in Phase A. And then in Phase B, I take the 2-star Tempests just because they're that much better. And again, any situations moving into that phase, I can take care of with those Tempests. Tempests are fantastic because they are really fast. Sometimes that can be a bad thing though, since they overshoot their targets. Now you can get a Thunderbolt with rockets in Phase A, but honestly I've always liked to rely more on bombs, since they tend to have a wider radius of stunning capability than rockets. Rockets are very focused compared to a bomb, which generally will hit an area of effect. So that's why I just prefer the bombers as opposed to the Thunderbolt in Phase A. Also, those Spitfire Mark 9s are so much cheaper than the Thunderbolt, so that's another reason. Yeah, moving into Phase B, you can get more of those Thunderbolts. I haven't really been finding much success with Thunderbolts in general, like the Rocket Thunderbolts, so I don't tend to rely on them, and that's why they don't go into my division. I would instead wait for Phase C, where you can get the 4 15 HE power bomb Mosquitoes, which will basically pin like a Panther or even a King Tiger, I think, in one bombing run. And that's just really useful for picking them off on the ground, or trying to make them surrender, or like just make them show side armor or whatever. Just that's what Mosquitoes are good for. Just make sure that if you're using them, again, you're not using them for lethality, you're using them for pinning units down and then dealing with stuff on the ground with your other stuff on the ground. Like, the Mosquito shouldn't be there for that purpose. It can, of course, kill an AT gun and enemy infantry with that HE, but don't just like bring in a Mosquito to bomb one infantry squad. That's kind of pointless and a massive waste of points. So yeah, think about what you're doing when you're bringing in any aircraft in any division. Honestly, it's just a good thing to have in your mind. And that's your lot. That is all of the tabs. I know this was me rambling on for quite a while, but yeah, there you go. That's the Demi-Brigade SAS. So just in general, if we go over like the phases quickly, in phase A, you actually have a pretty like mediocre income. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either, and will allow you to bring in a lot of your cheaper recon and infantry early on. So you will never really be out of infantry availability, and especially recon availability. But I would recommend, if you're using this build of the division, that you go easy on using like Makazars, for example, as close range infantry, because you'll find you'll lack recon infantry later in the game. So definitely sort of mix in the Makazars with the Rallies. Don't just rely on the Makazars and the Saboteurs primarily. Also partisans, you know, like they're only 10 points a piece again. There's just a lot of cheap units, and the majority of your money is going to be going towards like the Panzer IV or the Panzer IIIs, or even any aircraft you buy early on. And in phase B, the trend sort of continues. You'll again be focusing on cheaper infantry, cheaper AT, like your cheaper AA. Maybe you'll afford yourself the off map if you really feel like you need it. It's great for like breaking out of stalemates and so on. But again, it's probably one of the lowest incomes for phase B. Then of course you move into phase C, and that's where you can really go like hard into the enemy. You get the M4A376s, and if you support them correctly, even against things like Panthers, you can use your Mosquitoes to bomb those out. You can use your M7s to try and arty them. You have plenty of choices in ways to make ground in phase C. And then I would say once you take some ground, you know, back it up with those M5 guns, so that when they try and counterattack, you can have something there to support you. And that's generally the way that I would play this out towards the end of the game. So there you go. Hopefully you guys have found this helpful. Let me know what you guys think of my division in the comments, and what sort of changes you'd make to your own. I am of course going to be moving on with the other 3 DLC divisions from Back to Hell, so hopefully you look forward to those. In the meantime, that's all though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.